Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our Justice in Every Breath interview series. My name is Danielle Berkowitz-Sklar, and I'm with Moms Clean Air Force in Equimalides. And for those of you who are new to Moms, we are a community of almost 2 million parents and caregivers across the country fighting for clean air and climate protections for our children's health. And this is our live series where we spotlight people in our community that are leading the charge on protecting our environment and uplifting people on the front lines. And today I have the pleasure of being joined by Lisette Perez. And Lisette Perez is an environmental educator, conservationist, and youth leader from the South Side of Chicago. Thank you so much for being here. A little bit more about Lisette before we get started. She studied natural resources science and management at the University of Missouri-Columbia and has since brought her passion for people and the planet to roles across the country, from interpretive ranger in the Tongass National Forest in Alaska to marine policy work in Oregon and community engagement at Chicago's Field Museum. She's also served on the EPA's inaugural National Environmental Youth Advisory Council and now serves on the Next Generation Youth Advisory Council and with the National Parks Conservation Association. So that's quite an impressive background, and we are so honored for you to join us here today.
Thank you, Danielle. I'm so excited to be here. Very excited to speak about all things climate and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd love to start off by learning a little bit more about where your journey began. What are your earliest memories about caring for the environment, and how did this influence your work in conservation and education and advocacy?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I have a very linear path to this work. Growing up in Chicago, I think there are some safety concerns which didn't allow me to gain a lot of exposure to the outdoors as a child. But some of my earliest memories do include going out to parks for different like family cookouts. I think that's a big thing for Latino communities, the cookouts at parks. And I remember those were my earliest memories of being outdoors. And I think for Latino communities, it's so important to be in community. And I think that was one of the big ones, cookouts at the park. And I think I think my earliest exposure to the outdoors. And I remember just being surrounded by trees, um, and even hearing the cicadas at these events, at these family gatherings, sometimes even going to field days or recess time at elementary school in our local parks here in Chicago, here in our inner city parks within the city of Chicago. So, yeah, not a lot of exposure like many people who grow up going to visit national parks or national forests during the summer, but I think I'm slowly starting to get into that now that I'm an adult, but definitely the Chicago Park District I think is an important part of my life.
Yeah, and a lot of the work that you do now is so focused on people and community, even though you are working on conservation and green spaces. I mean, all of that is rooted in, equity and access. And so when did you kind of realize that there was a gap to fill there? Like you talk about your experiences being outdoors, but when did you
Mhm.
realize, oh, this is actually something that we have to fight for and that a lot of communities don't have access to?
Yeah, I think it was really when I went to college. So when I went to college, I didn't really know what I wanted to pursue. Um, Being first generation, sometimes you don't have the resources or someone directly in your immediate family who can guide you. And I think that was the hard part too. Like when you're 18, you're still really young. You're unsure of what you wish to pursue. So I just took a leap of faith and decided to major in natural resources. And I realized quickly that I wasn't very fond of like chemistry and math. I didn't really like the hard science, but I really enjoyed the social science side of things. And that's why I pursued the human dimensions emphasis of my degree. And I realized that I did well in courses like environmental justice or talking about urban parks and just seeing the social science element of it and the sociological and the economic impacts on people. And yeah, I was halfway through like my college career where I realized, oh, environmental justice, that's a problem in Chicago where I grew up, and I'm only finding that out now here in Missouri, um, which is where my college was located. So
Yeah.
it took a while to learn about these issues. So I was around like 18, 19, 20 when I learned about what environmental justice was, and that was a big eureka moment of an awakening because I realized these issues aren't just textbook conversations, they're also lived experiences like my own. So while we were studying it in a textbook, I didn't realize that it was my own lived experience. And it was a reality for me and many people that looked like me in the city and many other communities. I'm only can only speak for Latino communities, but yeah, it impacts so many marginalized communities, and that was where I was drawn to. Okay, how can I further get involved with the people side of the environment?
Yeah, and you touch on so many topics that resonate a lot with our work at Equimalides. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the education point that you make is so important. A lot of times we're not making the connections between, you know, access to clean air, to a clean environment, to a stable climate, and how that relates to race, to language access, to
Mm-hmm.
our economic status. And
Mm-hmm.
we do want to make those connections. In fact, our motto at Mom's Clean Air Force and at Equimalides is justice in every breath for that reason, right? And we really want to bring attention to how a lot of these disparities and inequalities manifest themselves in unequal access to what should be the most basic human right, which is a clean environment. So with that, I'd love to know, you touched on it a little bit, but what does that phrase, like justice in every breath, mean to you? And specifically, how does it connect to your work in bringing green spaces to the South Side of Chicago?
Yeah, I think justice in every breath. I mean, that's so important. I like you basically said it. These are fundamental rights that we all deserve, and it's sad that we're still having to argue and make a case for why people deserve this basic things in life, clean water, clean air. Um, and I think that's what Eco Madres is doing. And is the epitome of justice in every breath. So applause to you guys for all the work that you're doing. And I think that relates back to, yeah, the green spaces. And I really think green spaces are so important for all communities, really, because especially in inner cities, being from the inner city, there's the hustle and bustle of everyday life, but it gets hard when you don't have the access to greenery and these green spaces, and it's been proven to green spaces to have a positive impact on our mental health. And it's also proven that the more you're surrounded by concrete and buildings, it impacts your mental health negatively. So we see this divide already, and I'm very much an advocate for green spaces. For example, in Chicago, there's a vacant lot problem throughout the city and in specific neighborhoods too, which is strategic, right? Touching on the environmental racism and injustice part. A lot of low income or Black and Latino communities, neighborhoods, they lack green spaces and there's a lot of vacant lots. And something that I hope to maybe promote in the future is turning these vacant lots into green spaces, because we know, like I just said, it can help impact positively our mental health, but also help combat the climate crisis and environmental injustices.
Yeah.
I mean, trees help mitigate the climate crisis by pulling carbon from the atmosphere and removing pollutants. So you're already addressing two problems: climate change and air pollution. And these are necessities, and we really need to fight for them. And I hope sometime in the future I can really advocate for that transformation of turning vacant lots into green spaces for all communities, but specifically vulnerable communities in Chicago.
Yeah, it's so inspiring to hear how, like throughout your journey and getting more educated on all these issues, you're constantly thinking about how you can bring it back to your community,
Mm-hmm.
and improve access for everyone. And yeah, you said it's not just about trees, right? It's about mental health, it's about physical health, it's about combating the climate crisis and even finding relief in shaded areas as we're seeing unprecedented heat waves across the country, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's so much more than what meets the eye, and a lot of communities take that for granted, that access for
Mm-hmm.
granted. So it's so important to bring awareness around that. And
Mm-hmm.
speaking, you mentioned how you're a representative of the Latino community, and you've done a lot of work to engage Latino youth in conservation and access to natural areas. So, and your story really shows the power of education and of visibility. And so my question is how if you could please talk a little bit more about that work that you've done with youth, but also how do you think we can best engage Latino communities, especially young people and students, in shaping a healthier and more sustainable future?
Yeah, I think I'll touch on the work that I've done. I've been very lucky to have the experiences that I've had. I mean, working in Alaska, Oregon, and back here at home, it's been such a privilege. But within those positions, for example, with the Field Museum, I helped with their environmental education programs. And basically, we would lead different workshops and field trips for third to fifth graders in different schools across the city. And we would take them to our forest preserves. Cook County, Chicago, has a large group of forest preserves. And I didn't even know that until I started to work at the Field Museum. So that was great to expose young kids to the outdoors and just being able to be outside for a bit, even just get them out the classroom into another classroom setting, essentially, was great. And even as an interpretive ranger for the Forest Service in Alaska, we had many visitors from across the world visit the Tongass National Forest. And a lot of times we did interact with kids because we had junior ranger programs, which are little like workbooks for kids, so then they can earn a badge afterwards. And there was a lot of engagement there and answering the questions about the glaciers and the bears, because there was bears and there was a glacier right there that I worked in front of, and the trees. And I think it's very nice to be able to provide that experience for young learners. And how do we engage young people or young Latinos or just young people in general? I think it starts with changing the narrative. I think a lot of communities, there are different communities that experience the outdoors in different ways. It's not a universal experience, whether it's through historical events that took place or whatever the case may be. Not everyone feels safe out in the outdoors, unfortunately. And I think we have to start changing that narrative and breaking down those stigmas.
Yeah.
I think sometimes BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, and people or communities of color feel that the outdoors isn't made for them. And I think that's where the narrative change comes from. We have to start acknowledging that the outdoors are also for us, even if it doesn't feel like it. And I think there's a lot of organizations and community leaders already doing that work to break the narrative and shy away from that. And I think also it's important to start your kids at a young age to make sure that they're curious and let them explore those curiosities and go outside. If they are interested in bugs, let them check out the bugs outside. Or if they're interested in trees, take them to a forest preserve, or whatever you have access to. I think it's important to teach your kids young so you can break that stigma at an early age. And that's really important. But also having the accessibility, it's not the accessible part, unfortunately, isn't available for everyone. Not everyone is able to, go to a national park or forest, or sometimes don't have time to even visit their local inner city park. So I think accessibility is a big problem that hopefully we can work on, as different communities can come together for that, like the Green Space project that maybe I hope others can also find inspiration in that and try to advocate for their own local communities and bring green spaces, look for grants, speak to their local representatives. And it could happen.
Yeah.
Many communities have made that happen. And I think that's definitely the power of community, um, can definitely break the lack of access and
Yeah.
build for that future.
Yeah, and you shared such an important message, for our audience, which is predominantly parents and caregivers, is, really get your kids out there in any way that you can. And
Hmm.
again, stepping back, it's a luxury for a lot of families to have the time and like the resources to do that. And so it's programs and people like yourself that are helping to create spaces where, there's accessibility in language and programs that are catered to kids, which are so important and are going to help us move forward and empowering young people to protect their environment and become the leaders that they want to be and to bring their lived experiences and their wisdom into the space, because there is so much wisdom there, and it's just a matter
Hmm.
of making room for that to be amplified in all these different spaces in the environmental movement. Speaking of, our community of parents and caregivers, as a young leader, can you share what, the importance of intergenerational advocacy, of people of all ages coming together, especially when it comes to protecting the health and the future of our young and future generations?
Yeah. I think I want to highlight again what I said, that it's important to engage youth when they're young, so you can break those stigmas and build that natural love for the outdoors and for the environment. It's important that you build that in at a young age so they can later on continue that love and respect it and advocate for it further. Just speaking for myself, I know I've been scared. I was scared growing up as a kid to go outside because, again, like the safety concerns of being from an inner city. But it's only now that I'm really feeling comfortable with being outside. So I think I really can't emphasize that enough. Make sure to implement that in children at a young age and allow them to value the outdoors. And I think it's important to also recognize that, like, the climate crisis can't wait, advocacy can't wait. We speak a lot about future generations, but the generations are here. They're already here. A lot of children are already learning about like the outdoors as they're starting to walk, and they're going to inherit, excuse me, what is going on now. So I think we need to break away from this conversation about the future, but it's already happening, and it's important to advocate for that now so we can have a sustainable and just future.
Yeah,
um, so it's very important to advocate for that now, not
yeah,
just for
that's
tomorrow.
an important message to realize. We can talk future all we want, but there are communities living the impacts. And
Yes.
more, it's, we are realizing that no one is immune to this, right? So
Hmm.
it's front and center. And now is the time with the momentum that there is to realize, okay, we have to get
Yeah.
involved and do as much as we can because this is a problem now.
Hmm.
So for the last question, I'm going to switch gears to Spanish. Como activista latina, Lisette, ¿qué mensaje te gustaría dar a nuestras ecomadres que luchan por un aire más limpio y la necesidad de proteger nuestra madre tierra?
Hmm. Quiero darle las gracias a todas las psicomadres que están luchando por el bienestar de nuestras comunidades, y gracias por luchar por un futuro saludable, sostenible, y por combatir la crisis climática y las injusticias ambientales. Y sin ustedes no pudiéramos estar aquí. Muchas gracias.
Bueno, muchas gracias por ese mensaje, y por estar con nosotras hoy, Lisette. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your, with all the leadership and all the incredible experience and knowledge that you have, for sharing that with us today. And we are so inspired by you, and grateful that you joined us for this
Yeah,
Justice
thank
and
you,
Equity
Daniel.
series.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Of course. And for anyone tuning in, we love to leave our viewers and our community with calls to action. And so in a few seconds, you will see a petition pop up on screen. Recently, funds passed by Congress have been frozen by the current administration without congressional approval. And without these funds, which include critical loans, tax credits for clean energy, transportation, clean air, we are going to see the impact on our health and on our future. And so we're asking you to please sign to join us in raising your voice. And bueno, en unos segundos van a ver un enlace en la pantalla y les pedimos que si por favor firmen la petición para decirle al Congreso que la congelación de fondos federales perjudica a nuestros niños. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you all so much. And till next time.
Yeah.